So yeah, like essentially, like I'm just going to start where I left off yesterday. With these like meta learning principles, like I was talking about how we're going to have like these month long sessions with this meta learning component. Meta learning is basically intake. It's highlighted in red here, and you can see at the bottom there the focus, directness, drill, retrieval, retention, and then every month there'll be a teach and tell before the main session, and people that are starting will come into the teach and tell and give their teach and tell events. You say I've had it called the multitudes as opposed to the masses there, to borrow a term from Antonio Negri. Anyway, so this is like the idea, right? There's going to be monthly meta learning intake sessions and monthly teach and tells. I'm not going to talk too much more to that and sort of move on to some other stuff. So essentially, like it's funny because I've been in this like Web3 community, and I am a software engineer, or was in a previous life, but have mainly been focusing on constructivist practices, which is almost like in any sort of circumstance with programming, it might be usability driven development or something like that. You're doing product discovery very closely with people that are involved. You might be developing the software like artisanally. I wrote a Substack article about this a while back. That's kind of almost purposely contrarian. I don't know to what extent this perspective is exactly silly, but I do think that it's a good approach. I mean, in the big picture, but I think it's a good in the grand scheme of things. But I think it's a good approach for community driven development or something like that. I said like usability driven, community driven. I think those are effectively synonymous if you're looking for things that a community needs, and deferring on the needs of software as much as possible. One of the cautions in that article I wrote is that software is very often seen as the panacea, and it isn't always, especially when you're in essentially like voluntarist situations where people's free action are at a premium, and software can definitely devour everybody's activities with promises of great scalability and low or zero marginal cost and so forth. And then a lot of community development and organizing falls by the wayside as a result. Some of this ties into sort of the Nomad science mentality itself, but it's just something that I guess has been a theme on my mind. So these practices, Trello Kanban swarming, it's literally just choosing a workspace. You get enough boards to where, like, if you're just a number of people that are trying to start, a scrappy organization, you can pair up and pick a board, pick a responsibility, and just start Kanbaning. I've done this twice before locally, and it's met with low moderate success, I'll say. In the first instance, 2 of us were using it. In the second instance, 3 of us were using it, although it ended up kind of getting used for proposals rather than activity swarming, and like discussion points and things like this, which was a little bit outside of the spirit. And I think I'm developing these kind of like lo-fi protocols as a result of some of this activity, which I do intend to surface in a Coda document soon, in structuring it so that there's a clear sort of onboarding process and so forth for people that are like practicing at the organizational level and practicing at the learner level, I guess. The Trello is essentially an open practice. So even when we were building and making makerspace last year or 2 years ago now, it was something that we invited the community to. Although because of the prior makerspace, it was really outside of the cultural norm to just say like, hey, don't worry about breaking things, ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So yeah, on conferences with rotating facilitation, this is how the last group we met in Oak Park here in Sacramento. Everybody kind of brings their own flair to the situation, and so that went reasonably well. That group officially disbanded last week, so moving sort of more to tertulias, the sort of Spanish term for these intellectual coffee salons. So accountability buddies is like this, essentially with the ultra learning sessions, you're going to be reporting for your accountability buddy rather than for yourself. Stuff like that like kind of helps distribute the sort of like communication. And a Pomodoro system, like I have one of these. I'm not going to be talking about it today. It's basically a text-based system with a dashboard, but I do have Pomodoro ends every Tuesday, and people come to those on occasion. Self-reflexive social network analysis. We'll be talking about that a little bit towards the end of this. I'll be talking about timebucks economy first. So during one of these Oak Park sessions, we were just like talking, and as they were doing that, I cut a piece of paper into 4 pieces and said, okay, like here's 2 hours, like, this is a timebucks economy. You give it to a person you want to do a favor for, write your initials on it. And as soon as 4 of them have been completed, it gets destroyed. And so it's a pay it forward economy, essentially. Everybody kind of picked up on this and was like, yeah, this is really cool. So we had like one-on-ones. I taught a friend some JavaScript tricks. So it just went around, and that was cool. The bucks are still in circulation. I don't think we've destroyed any of them yet, but there's 32 hours, I think, at stake here. So yeah, like there's an interesting kind of aspect to this. Like this is just like an experiment, but there's an idea behind it that I'll hopefully have time to talk about. This is directly cribbed from Michel Bauwens, who is founder of the P2P Foundation. And so the idea is there's sort of like a problem I want to say that I experienced in the software industry, and I still kind of want to tackle, which is that you go from like zero to employed. You're either like in or you're not. And I went to a boot camp just to be able to think on my feet and do whiteboard algorithms. It's somebody that you don't know from a hole in the ground, essentially, and trying to impress you. And like I've been on both sides of the table, and it's a little bit strange, right? It's alienating, slightly dehumanizing. So what about like a semi-permeable kind of membrane where it's a little bit more supple, we'll say, than this process? Many people would admit that it's broken. I mean, this is not Michel Bauwens' idea, but as you look at this diagram, you can kind of see that there's an idea about using nonprofit for-profit hybrid structures that are basically designed to steward a community. So you can be at the commons level and start to have some sort of economy of participation, or possibly a gifting economy that can begin to lead all the way into the productive commons, we'll say, and actually interface via that with the market. So what I'm talking about here, like I'm linking this directly to timebucks, right? So I'm saying that basically with timebucks, because money flows in the opposite direction, it's a very enabling thing if somebody like actually picks up on it. But the original idea had to do with like, it was essentially like agrarianism, right? Like people that were actually taking care of the scarcity. Like somebody is like actually farming and stuff, and they give food to the community, and then as a result of like the number of hours or whatever that goes into farming, they double that, and then they give the second half of that out so that people can just do favors for each other. And there's still some way to structure that activity. I mean, some of the issues that I'll probably talk about in the future, have to do with, exactly, what the terms of these divisions of labor are. Anyway, like the intention of this diagram, which has been on the screen for all this time as I've been rambling again, is essentially to look at, something that's analogous to this agrarian scenario, where there's clearly like some part of the organization that's taking care of the scarcity. There's going to be rent to pay, other bills to pay, SaaS costs, like, whatever. And so on the right here, you can kind of see that, I've got like the labor for money, depending on the kind of situation. It can also be labor for food. These might be, like services and goods that are provided to customers. This would be a very normal organization. This part of the organization is stuff that people might prefer to automate. Whereas the other half is different. Not necessarily atelic in the sense that it doesn't have goals, but it's stuff that's done for the sake of doing it. So if somebody really likes sculpting or something like that, they're not, it's a completely different mentality from laboring. I'll just speak to like the numbered things here. Like so the idea is essentially that the labor generates timebucks in the free action economy. So actually generate gift economy tokens, and it allows those tokens to be backed by the amount of labor. Like it might be able to pay people like $20 an hour, $30 an hour just for doing favors for each other, right? And so then, as I was saying earlier about the broken interview process, here I put like, instead of broken interview processes, new candidates can be given timebucks to work on projects with low downside risk, gaining community trust, right? Not everything in the organization is going to have high downside risk. A lot of things are going to have high upside risk, and they just need bodies. Like if you're doing like event planning, things like that, it's just like, oh, we just need somebody to move the tables around. We need people to get things out of the truck. Like those people could actually be like principal engineers, like they could be very, very skilled people. You actually kind of gain trust within the organization in this much more organic way because it's possible to sort of stake in time in like these disparate sort of activities within the organization. So that's kind of like the idea there. 3, like timebucks can be gifted to a project. So instead of giving it to a person, say, you can pay it into, say, an event planning pool, and then that pool, because the money is backed by the wage slavery that the other half of the organization is doing, you basically you give your time buck to the project. That project gets funded maybe $3,000 because a bunch of people are going to work on it or something like that. And then when they're finished with it, they get the time buck back, and they can give it to somebody else. But let's see. Okay, so 4, like timebucks can be used as a forcing function to get somebody to stop procrastinating. So this is something that's could just come up in practice, right? Like you, like say, like I have some timebucks. I want to do a favor for somebody else. Like here's 8 hours of my time to sit down with you and make sure that you do the damn writing or something like that, right? So it becomes this kind of like way to like invest in each other and into things that your friends and colleagues want to accomplish. One other thing that I point out here before I move on is like, there's onerous versions of activity, and then there's like self, sort of intrinsically motivated versions of activity. And I would imagine that like over time, as more of the labor, the labor economy gets automated, or optimized, and more of the same people. This is an organization which has like these two halves. More of those same people will be able to put more and more of their time into the free action activity of the organization. But that's kind of like the idea of timebucks. And thanks for viewing this, and I will be back tomorrow.